Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm a partner at Deloitte, and over the last number of years, I've had the pleasure to host these series of live webcast conversations we've been putting on, primarily for our tech leadership audiences and enterprise technology enthusiasts. Today, we have a very, very interesting, highly relevant, very timely conversation. The conversation about cloud adoption and business value. I am thrilled to be welcoming two of my colleagues and friends, Kevin Young, a managing partner of Deloitte's cloud engineering practice, joining us from Toronto today. Kevin, good morning, good afternoon, welcome.
Good morning, Dalibor. Good morning, everybody.
Lovely to see you. And from New York, joining us is Diana Kearns-Manolatos. Diana leads Deloitte's global research on technology transformation. Good morning, actually good afternoon, Diana.
Hi, glad to be here.
I keep saying good morning because I am on the left coast, joining the conversation from the happiest place on earth, Anaheim, where I'm here this morning with my family. I am thrilled to welcome you all to this conversation. This is a live session, which means that I will invite all of you audience members to please feel free to join the conversation by submitting your question using the Q&A function of this Zoom platform. And we are going to do our best to answer any questions that you might have. Today's session is actually episode 3 of our 4-part series called Cresting the Cloud Horizon. In our first session, we addressed the topic of FinOps and how FinOps can be leveraged to better understand and manage cloud costs. On episode 2, The Art of Multi-Cloud, we addressed how leading organizations are thinking and addressing the complexities that most organizations find themselves in the current hybrid multi-cloud environments. Today's session is going to focus on cloud adoption as a path to generating business value. And our last episode in the series on May 28th, 2024, we'll be talking about cloud model blueprints for accelerated transformation. Now, as I mentioned, today we are going to be focusing on cloud adoption as a path towards business value. This topic comes to us through a very significant research that Deloitte recently conducted. And I would like to start by essentially inviting you, Kevin, to maybe share with our audiences the overview of that recent research and what stood out as the key findings.
Excellent. Thank you, Dalibor. Thank you, Diana, for joining us. I always sort of love this 1-2 punch with Diana because I think as part of her role with the center, she brings a global perspective to a lot of the trends that we're seeing here in the Canadian market. So as Dalibor mentioned, my name is Kevin Young. I lead our cloud practice for Canada. So I'm responsible for the build of our core cloud engineering capabilities, in addition to driving an integrated go-to-market with our cloud alliance partners, the big hyperscalers. This particular piece of research is really our capstone research for our cloud program in Canada. And the basis of it is a set of surveys that we did with over 200 cloud leaders in Canada, with a view to getting our finger on the pulse as far as what's happening, where are we at with respect to cloud adoption, what are the trends in terms of key opportunities, challenge areas. But we also we want to wrap a narrative around the data set itself in terms of what we're seeing in market, what our clients and our alliance partners are seeing. And so we augment the survey with a set of interviews with a couple of dozen of our CIO, CTO clients across the country, as well as the Canadian leaders from our large hyperscaler alliance partners. So that's the research. And maybe just to start, Dalibor, I'll highlight a few of the key trends that came through the report. Four trends, and the first 2 are more about what is the state of adoption in Canada, and the latter 2 I think are getting at some of the systemic shifts that we're seeing in terms of priorities with many organizations based on the data and based on the conversations that we had. Dalbor, the first trend is just recognizing the enormous amount of progress that was made relative to the last time we did this survey, which would have been in 2021. Obviously, at that time, lots of enthusiasm in the wake of COVID, and as far as the boom around cloud investment that we saw at that time. Good progress reported across the board in terms of the proportion of workloads in the cloud. And so, most of the organizations see over 40% of their workloads in the cloud today, either private or public cloud. The vast majority, over 80%, report being in kind of the optimization acceleration phases of the journey in terms of thinking about our Deloitte adoption model. And I love this. The majority of our responses also view themselves as ahead of their peers with respect to cloud adoption. And so no shortage of confidence in terms of where a number of our Canadian organizations, a number of our Canadian cloud leaders see them. The second piece that I would highlight is the economic uncertainty that I think we're seeing and we're feeling in market is real. And I'll contextualize this as keeping in mind the data set was in the kind of late kind of fall timeframe, right? So the latter part of 2023. Definitely 77% felt that the economic conditions were impacting their cloud adoption plans, were impacting the pace and priorities that they had, pointing to the kind of top scoring factors as inflation, the increasing cost of goods and services, as well as labor shortages in market as well. But having said that, when you look at the actual spend in market, cloud continues to outpace all other categories of IT spend, and that was reinforced by a lot of the data that we saw in our survey. And so 86% of organizations felt that their cloud spend would continue to grow next year and into the future.
I love what you said about 80% of organizations deem themselves to be ahead of their peers. It's
I would love to tell you that we sampled only the leaders, but I think it's indicative of a little bit of confidence, a little bit of swagger, to be sure.
I guess that's good. That's the same. I saw a study once that asked people, how would you rank your driving skills? And 80% of people said that they are above average drivers, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there's always an element of that, right? This is self-reporting, right? And so there's going to be a rosier picture that you have to kind of factor into the data set. But I think, certainly the comparison point against the 2021 same set of questions around cloud adoption and the progress is meaningful and real. The third trend was around this kind of larger shift that we're seeing in the dialogue and in cloud investment priorities from enabling the technology. If the last wave was about investing in the foundation, investing in capabilities, a lot of focus on enabling the underlying cloud technology services, to actually pivoting around enabling the business, enabling business-specific use cases. A lot of this coming from the sort of enthusiasm and advancement in things like generative AI and in just the kind of sheer number of compelling new industry solutions that are available, many of which are through the kind of big cloud providers, the hyperscalers ecosystems as well. And that comes through loud and clear in some of the key data points. We wanted to kind of understand the sentiment behind generative AI and asked organizations to sort of pick how they were feeling on a range from, fear, uncertainty, doubt to optimism, energization, hope, curiosity, and the positive absolutely won out. 81% characterized their feelings as optimistic, energized, hopeful, or curious. I think also just when you look at the numbers, and this is kind of leading into our fourth trend, which is more specifically around industry cloud solutions. I know this is a topic near and dear to Diana's heart in terms of some of the research our US team has done in this space. And The vast majority, again, 91% identified industry solutions as a really important enabler as part of their business transformation plans. When you look at the data as far as how many organizations were planning to invest in industry cloud solutions in 2022, it was 44%. In 2023, that jumped to 77%. And so just a massive number. And that's certainly, I would say, runs parallel to what we see in market, which is just the number and variety of these solutions in place. And I think it can be a little bit difficult to nail down when we say industry cloud solutions. What are we really talking about? I think we sort of view these as the building blocks that can be leveraged to accelerate digital transformation. And so they are cloud services, applications, other tools that can be used to accelerate that journey, that are, I would say, at an increasing level of sector-specific sophistication, anchored around, for us as Deloitte, our clients' signature challenges, which are unique and specific to each sector that we serve.
Yeah.
I'll pause there for now, Dalibor. Those are kind of four of the top line takeaways.
Very, very interesting. So the message is quite positive. People are quite optimistic. Adoption is picking up. And I distinctly remember when you and I had this conversation a couple of years back, that the sense was that actually Canadian adoption was falling behind. Now this research demonstrates that we seem to be picking up. Diana, from the US and global perspective, does this resonate with what you're seeing? And can you maybe expand the conversation with some more of the research that your team has been doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So it definitely resonates. I think that, what Kevin was just discussing around the enthusiasm, the pace of change, it's consistent with what we've been seeing globally, as well as in the US. I think, you refer to the Canadian market being behind. And so maybe just to look back in time a little bit, we'll see where the US market was about 2 years ago. And I think that what I'm hearing is very similar to what we were hearing in our 2022 Deloitte US Cloud survey. So we had surveyed 500 business and technology leaders across 5 different industries. And what we found about, again, 2 years ago was a very similar story in the US market. So it's good to see that Canadian respondents are picking up speed in viewing cloud as a cornerstone of their digital strategy. That was a major trend in our survey, or in our US survey, with 88% of the business and technology leaders believing that cloud is a vital tool and a cornerstone for driving revenue and maintaining their position in the marketplace. And another thing that we saw in the US study was a high level of maturity in US businesses thinking about how they invest not just in cloud, but all of the cloud adjacent technologies. So a big aspect of cloud is about actually all of the other technologies like AI and IoT and analytics that cloud investments enable. And in our US 2022 survey, we saw that an overwhelming majority, 90% of respondents, either agreed or completely agreed that their investments in cloud served as a force multiplier for their digital strategy related to those other technology investments. And so that was 2 years ago. Now, if you think about what's going on in the market with generative AI, for example, some of the data that we see in the state of generative AI survey that actually just published yesterday is that organizations are investing, that when they're investing in generative AI, they're needing to invest more in data management capabilities, cybersecurity, and of course, cloud. So cloud is only growing in importance. The organizations that were most mature in the US in our study in achieving their strategic goals and their innovation objectives, so that 30% of leading organizations were more likely to be seeing a range of benefits, not just the operational agility and efficiency that most organizations were trying to achieve, but these leaders were more likely to be seeing benefits related to developing new ideas and approaches and methodologies that could be enabled by their cloud investment, using cloud as a tool to help them enter new markets or achieve sustainability and environmental goals through their technology strategies. So I would also call out that compared to the US, we see the data that Kevin was just talking about. It's good to see the business-driven, innovation-driven, and value-driven similarities, as well as that importance around industry cloud, which we saw as a major differentiator for those value leaders in the US market. Our data showed that 74% of leaders completely agreed that industry clouds would be an enabler for their transformation, as compared with the only 35% of that lower group of hopefuls that were seeing industry cloud as a benefit or accelerator of their innovation, agility, and modernization goals. So that's some of what we're seeing from the US study. And similarly, on a global level, we just put out a global study within the last couple of months looking at 1,600 global business and technology leaders and how they're investing in technology. And so what we saw, beyond the US globally, is that data and analytics and cloud are some of the leading investment technology categories, as well as those with when organizations are investing in cloud, more than 60% of those that are investing in cloud platforms and more than 60% of those that are investing in cloud native say that they're getting a high return on those investments. So that's some of what we're seeing in the US, and it's also some of what we're seeing globally.
Very, very interesting. So there is some consistency, and the way I translate is that US still is about a couple of years ahead of where Canada seems to be at the moment. But the way I sort of translate what I heard from both of you so far is that generally we have moved from cloud as an investment for the productivity and optimization, which was at first stage, and now we are moving very rapidly into cloud being leveraged for sort of higher value business benefits. That's sort of the sense that I get. So, but Kevin, as you sort of reflect on this research, both from Canadian organizations that you and the team led and US studies, what do you see are the most important implications for organizations? Like what's the so what here?
Yeah, no. I think you summarized that well, Dalibor. It's a really interesting time to be a cloud leader right now. On the one hand, I think the potential, the hope, the aspiration has never been higher with some of the advancements that we've seen in AI and some of the industry solutions that we've spoken about. And technology leaders will play a really important role in helping the business navigate that, helping to separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. But at the same time, I want us to be realistic in terms of where things are at on the ground. And for many of our largest organizations, the journey around transforming the organization is still in early stages. And there are challenges with respect to things like multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, the added complexity at play. And I know we've hit some of those topics in more depth on this forum, Dalibor. Those are very real things. And so I think, the question really is, how do you deliver on that aspiration while making sure that the kind of everyday quotidian concerns of making the cloud run effectively and efficiently in a large, complex organization? I mean, that's the job, right? It's not easy. We identified 3 calls to action in the report based on the trends and the data set. And the first, might sound a little bit obvious, but if you buy the hypothesis that a lot of the investment is getting driven towards business-led use cases, alignment between technology and business becomes more important than ever before. And of course, this is a long-standing topic, but I think that that partnership and the role technology plays as an advisor to the business is going to be critical, as well as making sure that the investments that you're making to move the ball forward and advance at an organization-wide or enterprise-wide level are in sync, particularly for larger organizations, with some of the business-specific investments that you may be making in terms of how you're governing cloud for the organization as a whole. The second piece was just put simply, like, you better be sure your capabilities are ready to rise to the moment. And I think for a lot of the use cases, be it an analytics use case, an AI use case, be it being able to iterate rapidly on a digital product that you want to take to market, it assumes a level of fluency and maturity that many organizations are still working through. Right. And so again, this comes back to that idea that you want to kind of temper that aspiration with the reality of where you're at. And there's, just a bunch of everyday blocking and tackling that's required to move the ball forward and get to a spot of higher maturity on things like, your overall modern engineering capabilities for the organization. The last piece is kind of coming to the value of cloud, and I know, Diana, this is a topic that you've looked at as well. And as much as we talk about the higher level aspiration, the business side benefits that can be significant, there's a lot of business cases that we still see across some of the organizations that we serve that are like purely operational cost based. How much did it cost on-prem? How much is it going to cost in cloud? And for certain organizations, especially those that are looking to dramatically decrease their data center footprint, there's a business case still to be had there. But I think the larger play is some of the other pieces that we've talked about on this call. And if you're going to be able to pursue that, you need to look at more sophisticated ways of measuring the organization's progress, more sophisticated ways of measuring value. And I still think we're at the early stages of maturity in terms of how we do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Diana, of course, you and I had a number of conversations actually on this channel too about the criticality of bringing together both strategy, investments, tech investments that are aligned to the strategy, and change capabilities. So these three factors that need to be coming together in order for organizations to truly sort of maximize the likelihood of generating value. I'm interested in your perspectives of how well are the organizations doing this in relation to cloud investments?
Yeah, thanks for that. And, so as Kevin mentioned as well, technology value is a topic that I've been looking at that's near and dear. I've spent the last 2.5 years deeply researching the topic of technology value from every direction, speaking with experts and business leaders, academics, and running data analysis with real business and financial data as well as surveys. So I'll try to answer your question and distill it down to a few of the bigger points. So I think the first thing around those three levers is realizing how big the opportunity is. Because, all of the actions that Kevin just described, that's a lot of work. And so the first question is it really worth it to do all of this? And so we really asked that question, looking at over 4,000 companies, real business and technology investments, their 10K filings. We built our own natural language processing crawler to analyze what they were doing related to their business strategy, their technology investments, and their change capabilities. And what we found was that when organizations aligned all three of those critical elements, there was a $1.25 trillion market cap gain for Fortune 500 firms. So that's the good news. The bad news is that there's a real risk when you get it wrong. When organizations invested in their digital strategy and technology, but didn't get that change element right, there was a $1.5 trillion market cap risk. So the difference here is huge between getting it right and getting it wrong. It's a $2.75 trillion difference. And so as leaders invest in different technologies like AI, cloud, cyber, ERP, the metaverse, generative AI, and all of these others, starting with that value mindset and looking for where and how they want to gain value is key. These are big numbers we're talking about here.
Yep.
So now the second part of the question, when investing in cloud, what we found when investing in cloud is that there's also a big gap in how business leaders versus technology leaders are thinking about the value of technology. And so I'll pick generative AI because that's really what everybody is talking about today. It's a cloud-enabled capability where you need to be investing in cloud. And so what we saw is that in terms of the benefits that technology leaders are hoping to gain from generative AI, that they're twice as likely as business leaders to be thinking that generative AI can help them to detect fraud and manage risks. Whereas the business leaders are more likely to be looking at generative AI to increase their speed to developing new software and systems. So very different priorities for the same technology. And that's just one example. If we look at where business leaders are more focused for their cloud platform investments, we can see that business leaders are looking at KPIs like procurement value for the money that they're spending, employee utilization of the technologies, their EBITDA. Whereas their technology counterparts, when investing in cloud, are more likely to be focused on things like process effectiveness by 13 percentage points than when they're investing in their cloud platforms. So as business leaders are investing in technologies, whether generative AI or cloud, one of the things that we see is important is getting on the same page and closing that gap so that you have that alignment, that the business strategy, the technology investments, and the change capability are aligned. And what the data is showing right now is that business and technology leaders are not currently on the same page about what they're looking for technology to achieve for their organizations.
And Kevin, you mentioned a moment ago, like almost the stereotypical step number one is to achieve that business and technology leaders alignment. And it's clearly not there yet. So we need to keep bringing that up over and over, because I think that it actually needs to start there. The business leader and the technology leaders need to be on the same page as they embark on these journeys. These are not only significant investments, but if they go wrong, the magnitude of risk could sink the company. So this is really, really important to get right. Fascinating stuff, Diana. Thank you. So Kevin, how can then organizations start to pivot their orientation around how they think about value? We just heard from Diana that value can be generated best if strategy is supported by technology investment that's aligned to it and enabled through change capabilities, right? I'd love to get your perspectives on how should organizations pivot to think about value in the context of cloud investment specifically.
Yeah, absolutely, Gabor. And we talked about, part of that is what gets measured gets done, and getting more sophisticated on the measurement piece. But maybe I'll pick up the thread that Diana laid down around the distinction between business and technology perceptions of value. And, to the extent that a business leader may be after, whether it's new features and functionality, whether it's, a particular use case or optimization of a customer service process, and if technology, it's more about modernizing the underlying technology platform and what that entails. I do think that third piece that you mentioned in your equation there, Dalibor, around the change quotient is actually the largest prize. And so, the biggest thing is just changing the paradigm a little bit around this as, more than a migration of technology to cloud, more than, just the modernization investment or on the business side, like that specific use case, like all of that is part of it for sure. But like staying focused on that larger prize, which is, really changing how the organization is changing, how the organization delivers IT, how the organization is capable of change going forward, and to tap into that requires treating this as more of like a true business transformation. That shift in operating model. If we think of the kind of traditional IT as introducing a heavily staged process because of some of the limitations and challenges or just the lead time that comes back to standing up traditional infrastructure. There's just, for a lot of like our larger, more complex clients, years of organizational processes that have been built up around that. Years of like organizational systems. And, I do a ton of work within financial services. And so if you think of things like security and regulatory processes, if you think of things like, operating model controls around what first and second line can do, all of that comes into play. And so I think if you really want to tap into that third source of value around adopting more agility for the organization that will allow you to iterate more on the types of innovative use cases that Diana is talking about, that change piece just can't be understated and can't be underestimated, and needs to be brought forth in like a very direct and transparent way, and just acknowledging that. The probably the most common refrain that we heard in our interviews is this idea that technology is the easy part, right? The people part is hard, and whether that's working through some of those organizational systems to adapt a broader organization, whether that is building capability or evolving your the talents and skill set within your team, adopting that more modern engineering mindset, getting better integration across the SDLC from the various stakeholders involved. Cloud is a platform that can really help unlock the value of that, but it needs to be paired with all of these other things to work. And to me, that starts with not viewing this as a one-time use case, not viewing this as purely a tech modernization, but viewing this as a larger transformation of the underlying business model for how technology services are delivered for the organization.
Yeah, and what is actually interesting, so in other words, change from your perspective, also management of change, the capacity to actually adopt new ways of working by people who use systems enthusiastically is really the key. And Diana, as I was reflecting on the numbers you brought up earlier, we now know those are the three elements that can result in success, or if they're not done well, can result in actual degradation of value. So there is business aligned digital strategy, investments in technology that are aligned to that strategy, and management of change. When those three things come together, you mentioned increase in value, measured. This is not assumption, it's a measured increase in value, exceeds $1.2 trillion. And for those organizations that have done step one and have done step two, but have failed in doing the step three, which is all around change and people, that degraded the value of the organizations by $1.7 trillion. So you mentioned that there is a gap of like $2.75 trillion. All of that gap essentially hinges on how organizations manage that change, which is
exactly right. Yeah,
the change actually here is the key, right?
Yeah, and so one of the things that they need to do is change how they change. So
beautiful.
In order to link it to that strategy and the technology investments. And so, I really believe that businesses are at the threshold of a new technology transformation era. And that it is critical in terms of cloud that they rethink how they're changing. And so just to hop into my time machine and to go back in time for a little bit, if we look at the history of cloud adoption over the last 2 decades now, there was this first wave where organizations, early adopters, migrated to the cloud, lift and shift. There was a big promise of the value that they would be getting. And actually what they ended up with was drowning in complexity. And over time, as they continued over the next decade to migrate more of their workloads to cloud and adopt more cloud services, they became hybrid. But this was done really in an unintentional type of way. A business case here, a use case there, and not done at an enterprise scale. And so now organizations are really paying the price. They're drowning in that complexity. They have a tremendous amount of technical debt that they've accumulated over the last 2 decades. And that was really accelerated by the pandemic with this rush for many organizations to move into the cloud, to be able to embrace remote work, to enable software as a service, to launch cloud native applications, and to push more of their workloads, whether internal or customer facing, into the cloud. But now we are at this inflection point where organizations are at the 3rd decade of cloud, this 3rd wave, and they have an opportunity to really think differently. And it's not investing in a different technology, but it's really reorienting the way that they build purpose-built infrastructures and applications that are more hybrid by design, because we know that the future is going to be hybrid. And that everyone's not going to be 100% in the cloud. So this hybrid by design concept really is about thinking about how to reduce complexity with the architectures that you're building by design, and how to create those standards, the openness of the technology, common tooling, uniform orchestration, and more automated workloads so that you can operate across public, private, and probably some type of on-premise solutions. And so whether it's a mainframe migration that someone is working on, or if it is an IT modernization, or getting your ERP cloud enabled, we are going to be in this type of hybrid world. And so really developing those architectures by design for what they need to be enabling for the business is where things are going.
The wave 3, the 3rd decade of the cloud, is upon us. And
given
that this conversation now is more sort of focused on the Canadian marketplace and the research, Kevin, that you and your team led for Canada, a question came from one of our audience members. To what degree is Canada's data residency requirement limiting the adoption of cloud when data can be anywhere in the world? We've heard the version of this question popping up throughout, but I want to get your thoughts about sort of where are we at today?
Yeah, so I think most of our clients are past seeing that as a challenge, Dalibor. Each of the large cloud providers have invested in multiple regions within Canada. Probably the most recent would be the AWS center that was opened in the West very recently, just earlier this calendar year. And so I think the facilities are there for us to keep data in Canada and still leverage public cloud solutions. And the proof is in seeing, even for those most highly regulated industries that rely heavily on private personal information, like financial services, like government, are continuing to move forward with investments in public cloud. So I would say it's much less of an issue than what we would have seen even sort of several years ago.
Yeah, this is very good. Thank you very much for that. We are coming to the close. I wanted to ask you both to sort of provide your final sort of reflections. I might start. What I've taken out from what I heard today from both of you, and thank you very much for your time and for sharing your very, very timely insights. First, what I heard is that in Canada, the cloud adoption is accelerating, that there is optimism and there is energy. along with investment to propel organizations further on this journey. The second thing that I heard is that the proposition, the math, like if you wish, of you need to have a strategy that's clear, tech investment that is aligned to that strategy, and most importantly, ability for the organizations to go through that change continues to be very, very critical for cloud investments, along with other types of digital transformations. The third thing that I heard that I remember is we are now in our third decade of cloud, and there is a clear third wave of cloud that is not only upon us, that we are in the midst of, which perhaps we can define as the hybrid cloud decade of cloud, I guess. But I would love to get, Kevin, your sort of reflections and your sort of thoughts, final thoughts of the session. Please, over to you, and then we'll have Diana wrap us up.
Yeah, sure, Dalibor. That sounds good. Honestly, like I really try to apply that kind of athlete mentality of, every day improving in small increments. And so,
Yep.
When I think about cloud, I'm not, obviously there's a tremendous potential around innovation, but I'm less about the perfect use case or the killer app. And it's more about, how do you harness all of that aspiration, all of that potential, all of that investment, the new technologies and what's possible, while continuing to make progress in terms of the less sexy work of making cloud work, particularly for many of our large enterprise and public sector organizations. And that discipline, that everyday discipline, is I think that third piece in the equation, the change quotient that really separates the people that see the return on investment in a much more meaningful way. And so it's how do you shine a spotlight on what's possible, that longer term aspiration, the vision, some of the innovation, and make progress around that, while dealing with the everyday concerns of many of the challenges that we talked about in our hybrid era. That to me is the paradigm that we're in, and the challenge ahead that I think a lot of our Canadian cloud leaders are wrestling with.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you for that. Diana, any of your reflections?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're not here to debate whether cloud adds value. I think everyone knows that they need to be investing in cloud, but I also think it's worth remembering that IT budgets are maybe growing, but not at the rate for how important technology is to be powering the business. So my parting thought would be that everyone who is trying to put forward an investment business case is in a difficult position right now, because there's a lot that organizations want and need to do with technology. So being able to think more consistently about value, which is a topic that I've spoken about here, Dalibor, with you on this forum before, is critically important, whether it's OKRs or KPIs. Thinking consistently across whatever technology you're investing in, what the financial value goals are, customer, process, workforce, and purpose, those 5 elements of value, so that every investment that you're putting forward, as whether it's a net new investment or a reinvestment, can be looked at on even ground with other investments. Because we all know, Gen AI is the topic du jour. And that there may be some really mission critical investments in cloud that are needed to support those ambitions. So thinking holistically as well as consistently around what the value is that you're trying to achieve for the business with technology is where I would end the conversation.
Because at the end of the day, it all boils down to exactly that, right? What is the actual value we are creating? Thank you very much for those reflections, Dan and Kevin. Now, Kevin, we still have some time, and there was an interesting question that just came through, and I wonder if you wouldn't mind maybe just answering that. So, the multi-cloud architecture by design, specifically the hybrid architecture by design, the question came from Sebastian. You've seen massive investments that organizations actually are making into, Azure and Google and AWS. How are actually organizations thinking about these multi-cloud hybrid environments? Can you any comment on the intentionality of the multi-hybrid design?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is what Sebastian is getting at, Dalibor, but I think the reality is we do see a lot of organizations struggling with a kind of growing multi-cloud footprint, and in some cases that is a function of by design deliberate choices. In other cases, it is large organizations that maybe didn't have the right governance and controls in place, and that complexity grew on a kind of one use case at a time type of mentality, without looking at the larger picture of the technology that needs to be supported for the organization at large. I would say for organizations that have been a bit more deliberate, the trade-off around multi-cloud is the access to choice, a bit of that best of breed approach where you're accessing multiple different hyperscalers, and the different services and tools that are available in their ecosystem. By the same token, I think a lot of our clients feel that having a multi-cloud footprint is an important tool for negotiation, is in terms of just holding your other partners accountable for maintaining a competitive position, maintaining continuing to invest. We have other players where the view is to make sure that you have truly mastered one hyperscaler to start before moving on to your second and third, because of that complexity, because of some of the added work required to build capability and skills on one hyperscaler. I think a lot of our cloud alliances are quite savvy in terms of offering investment that's tied to the workloads you're willing to commit to their ecosystem. And so the more you're willing to commit can sometimes translate into larger investment. And so that's also a factor with organizations that sit on the other end of that decision continuum. And so it's a larger topic, obviously, Dalibor. There's a lot of factors that come into play. But I really like where you started with and the question, which is the intentionality of it, right? Wherever you land on what's right for your organization, the idea around being deliberate, understanding the implications, as opposed to it being happenstance is probably the important piece for sure.
So what I would perhaps extract from your comment is that there are different schools of thought emerging, that some organizations are intentionally investing in, or maybe over-rotating to one chosen provider because they want to maximally leverage that lever that they've pulled, and others are trying to get value by doing exactly the opposite, but exactly the opposite, as in playing off multiple cloud providers to ensure that there is competitiveness and so on and so forth. But there are different schools of thought. But what is important is to be intentional, to actually to make a choice that is right choice for you, for the time, and for the organization that you're in, right? So intentionality probably is the key answer here.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And while you look at the chat, maybe too, I'll add in some data to bring it to what we're seeing in the market on that issue. So in our US study, we saw that more than 80% of organizations are multi-cloud and hybrid.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the de facto environment that we're operating in. But to bring it back to those leaders versus the hopefuls, what we saw was that intentionality was a major factor. The leading organizations were more likely to be working with around 4 or 5 different cloud vendors. So that could include hyperscalers as well as cloud providers. So the hopeful organizations, or those that were in the middle, so not achieving as much value from their cloud investments, were either focused on just 1 or 2, so on one end of that spectrum. So when they are focusing on that enterprise strategy, they're not yet gaining the full value of the cloud, or they were focusing on 12 plus vendors. So drowning in that complexity, and then also not achieving the full value. So I think in the research, we called it finding that magic mix.
Yeah.
And so I think the path to that might be starting with one hyperscaler and really getting it right, and then building from there. Because the reality is that, 80% of organizations are operating in a hybrid and multi-cloud environment. And so it is that intentionality of how do you design your approach to get there.
Yeah. This was wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Kevin and Diana. This was lovely, very, very informational, very educational, and somewhat inspirational. I want to thank you very much both for finding the time to be with us. As far as the audience is concerned, of course, this is recorded session. We're going to post the recording. If you'd like to listen to it again or share it with your colleagues, please do. And I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow as we unpack our final Tech Trend 2024 on the topic of core modernization. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for your time and wish you a lovely and happy Tuesday. All the very best and see you all soon. Thank you.